Okay, wow. Wimbledon 2022, obviously not sparing a moment to be overly dramatic this year. It's been quite the eventful first round, to say the least, really. You've got a lot of guys that were unanimously considered top contenders, really under siege out of the gates. So much so that some even have crashed out in round one. You can see that through my predictions. I didn't see 3 of my 8 quarterfinalists going out and 2 of my semifinalists going out. Obviously, 2 different reasons, but obviously I made this video to pretty much highlight everything that went down through the first 2 days at Wimbledon because it really was a handful. So, straight off the bat, I'm just going to start with our 2 overwhelming favorites, at least in my view, in Nadal and Djokovic, who each looked pretty scratchy out of the gates. As far as Novak is concerned, Sun Woo Kwon really did play a very good match to his credit. Never really went away in this one, and he gave Novak all that he could handle. And, Novak, on the other hand, for sure, much like a year ago, was pretty slow out of the gates. It really hasn't been atypical, though, throughout Novak's career. See him have these dips here and there that cost him a couple of careless sets. Ultimately, most of the time, as we all know, they don't usually end up, hurting him all too much. This match really, aside from Kwon having a break point to go up a break once they were knotted up at a set apiece early in the third, save that, I never really felt that Djokovic was in, any type of significant danger. Not to say that he would have been, even if Kwon converted that break point. Djokovic probably still is the favorite to win that third set, but nonetheless, once Novak, wiped away that break point with a big second serve, I believe it was like 112, somewhere around that ballpark. I know it was at least around 110, but got a service winner out of that, and after that, honestly, this match was kind of over. Kwon did well to still keep within striking distance as well as he could, but I think really after that, Djokovic's serve started dialing in, something that his first serve percentage really was not there through the opening stages of this match. He was having to hit a lot of second serves, but it really came alive in the second half of the match and propelled him to the finish line because the ground game certainly was more scratchy than your typical Novak Djokovic. But no harm done at the end of the day. Djokovic is through and looking good to still go deep here. And then you go to Rafael Nadal, who similarly so was nowhere near his best in the opening round. In fact, I would consider this to be one of Nadal's worst matches in the last 5 years, ever since he's, come back and become an elite player in his post-prime years. However, he looked every bit the player that has not played on this court in 3 years. Much like Djokovic the day prior, Francisco Cerundolo also played his part. Played as well as I've ever seen him play, and admittedly, that's not really all that much. It's like Miami and today. But nonetheless, Cerundolo seemed to be playing as well as he could, and really for portions of this match, he was dictating play and had the biggest ground stroke on the court today with his forehand. And, the flow of this match to me really was a lot of Nadal just reacting and trying to probe errors out of Cerundolo because he just did not have it himself off the ground, off either wing, but particularly his forehand was just not penetrating at all. And on top of it, he was just missing a lot of them. Obviously, it's very easy to look at the stats, and Wimbledon is very generous with tracking unforced errors, and he had 40 through about 3 sets and a half, not even 4. He was really playing very poorly, and The score probably is not going to reflect how close we truly were to this one going 5 sets, because I believe at 3-1 in the fourth, Cerundolo had 3 looks at breakpoint to stretch the lead to a double break. In all likelihood, probably pushes it to a fifth if that's the case. But then we get to, another theme of this match. Because Nadal was hitting his ground strokes and forehand so central and loopy and passive, and pretty much just letting Cerundolo dictate play for a good part of this match, he really had to lean on his serve as a bailout, and it was the case through the opening 2 sets, particularly in the first. Cerundolo was in a lot of his service games, and his serve came up huge for him to save a couple of breakpoints early on, and it did the same in the fourth. Really, all in all, I think the only thing Nadal did particularly well in this match was serve. First serve in particular. Second serve was kind of being picked on by Francisco. But really, the first serve and then net play, which he was pretty sharp for the most part. It had its poor moments as well, certainly, but I think overall it was a pretty good outing at net. And he really needed both of those, because off the ground he really just was not able to hit through Cerundolo and hit a winner, really. I talk about the unforced errors. He barely was over 20 winners for the match as well. But, at the end of the day, it's huge that Nadal got through in 4, competed as well as ever to prevent that fourth set getting away from him, and as the big three have done countless times in the past, it's just like a flick of a switch, and they can turn their play around on a dime and just run away with a match out of nowhere, and that's really what happened after Nadal got out of trouble in the fourth. He will have time now. He has some breathing room with this draw opening up to get better, and I'm sure he will. I think it just might take a bit longer than we might expect, given just how long it's been since he's played on grass. But nonetheless, both Nadal and Djokovic downing some very inspired efforts from their first round opponents. Now, I talk about Rafa Nadal's draw opening up, and I guess I'll talk about the non-tennis impacts first, with Matteo Berrettini and Marin Cilic having to withdraw from the tournament before their campaigns could even get up and running, both on account of positive COVID tests, of course, and you've got to say, just brutal timing for both. These are two guys that grass is probably their favorite surface, and both of them seemed to be in good form, poised to do some damage at Wimbledon this year. Both guys having very fruitful grass court seasons, as well as form coming in. You wish the best for them in recovery, but yeah, there's no doubt that's just rotten timing. I will say that both deserve credit for being upfront and publicly stating that they were infected, because I really was surprised to find out that Wimbledon is not preventing players from playing explicitly, even if they are positive, at least according to this tweet from the page of a renowned Spanish sports podcast, which is an interesting choice to say the least. But anyways, you have these withdrawals, and they both send pretty seismic shifts through the bottom half of the draw, and then we see what manifested on court in the last 2 days, and not only has that affected the bottom half, but the top half as well, with Hubie Hurkacz in the top half going out, and Felix Auger-Aliassime today in the bottom half going out. Now with Hubie, his match with Alejandro Davidovich Fokina was just nuts. I mean, this was the type of match like that Khachanov-Korda match at Wimbledon last year, where momentum was just flipping on a dime, and there really was no telling what was going to happen next. Admittedly, I didn't really get to catch much of this match. However, I did get to see what was, a big flashpoint in the third set, when it seemed like ADF was really on his way to a routine upset of Hubie Hurkacz, was ready to get out of there in a relatively routine straight sets at 5-3, 40 love, up 2 sets to love. And obviously everyone wanted to talk about the tweener at 40 love, and certainly had he gone on to lose this match, that would have gone down in infamy, because honestly, to be fair, I kind of felt that Hubie hit such a good return and he came so fast at ADF's feet that he really didn't have much time to react. Yeah, he probably could have gotten out of the way, but I think it was blown out of proportion a little bit just because Davidovich Fokina is a bit of a showman and he went for a tweener, a front-facing tweener, of course, but I feel like that took people's attention away from just how big of a collapse that was that game, because it was absolute self-sabotage. Like, Hurkacz barely had to put any balls back into play, and Davidovich Fokina just played an atrocious game. And for the better part of the next 1.5-ish sets, it really seemed like ADF was just shriveling away. Really seemed like he just could not get over having blown that game. This even in spite of a rain delay, I believe, early in the 4th set that theoretically should have given ADF some time to gather himself, even though he was down a break in the 4th at this point, I believe. But no, even upon resumption, ADF really just seemed like he had not gotten over that. Really seemed like a no-brainer that Hurkacz was about to cruise to victory after this Davidovich Fokina collapse. Hubie held on to a break throughout the duration of the 5th set, and all the way up until he had to serve out the match, at which point Davidovich Fokina came up with the goods, to his credit. Real gut check there for him when he was on the verge of losing, and honestly would have been a real disastrous loss given just how close to a routine win he was here. Didn't catch the whole match, but from what I did, it really seemed like Davidovich Fokina was able to put the Hurkacz forehand under some pressure. Obviously did so slicing a lot, keeping the ball low, and Hubie, it really showed that's not something that he's comfortable producing consistently. I've got to say, I personally definitely did not take the threat of ADF in this opener as seriously as I probably should have. Definitely seemed hard to believe considering Hurkacz's form coming into this and how well he'd played in Halle, but, what can you say? The curse for non-Federer Halle champions continues, and, similarly moving on with the bottom half, we saw Felix Auger-Aliassime fall to Max Cressy. Now, that was a threat in the opening round that I did take into account. However, I, of course, had Felix going through. Cressy, a big throwback of a player with how routinely he employs serve and volley as his go-to game plan. Big serve to boot. He was always going to be a nightmare matchup for whoever drew him in the first round, and that happened to be Felix Auger-Aliassime here. Sucks for my predictions because, being totally honest, Taylor Fritz was my first instinct for who would meet Nadal in the quarterfinals, but, didn't have the courage of my convictions on that. I cited Felix's consistency recently in slams and his ability to win ugly early on, and I feel in this case, he played with fire a bit too much. Even with, the consistency that I cited, having made quarterfinals or better in his last 4 majors, in a lot of those he was struggling early on. Just look no further to the last 2 slams this year. At Roland Garros' first round had to go 5, come back from 2 sets down. Aussie Open also had to go 5, albeit against a tricky opener against Emil Ruusuvuori, but basically, Felix has shown he's not always sharp out of the gates, and to be fair, this match, I think, relatively was a pretty high-quality match. It just seemed like Auger-Aliassime kind of buckled in some crucial moments here. Double fault down set point in the third set breaker, and then missing a pretty routine inside-in forehand at 5-all in the fourth set breaker. And against someone like Cressy on grass, playing as inspired as he was today, those one or two lapses really can cost you the match, and that ended up being the case here. Max really didn't let him off the hook for those mistakes. Full credit to Cressy, he played great. That being said, definitely do feel this was a missed opportunity for FAA. Definitely an underwhelming grass court season, given how he has shown in the past that he can play on this surface, and given the step forward he has taken this season, I really did expect a much better grass court season out of him this year, but also gotta acknowledge tough luck with this draw. And then similarly so, Carlos Alcaraz also faced with a very tricky opening round match against Jan-Lennard Struff. Didn't anticipate it being that tough, to be fair. Did not see Struff playing that well as he did, given the nightmare of a season he has had, but he really played up to the occasion, and he was just clubbing the ball, whether it was the serve, whether it was off the ground. Alcaraz really had to weather a storm here, and much like his compatriot today, it really was the serve that bailed him out a lot. Hit a career high 30 aces, and that is definitely something that pops off the stat page, albeit Struff not an elite returner, but 30 aces is 30 aces. This was another very entertaining watch, and all credit to Alcaraz. It would have been very easy to give in to the barrage that Struff was throwing at him at times in this one. Some of his trademark shot making shown through again in the most crucial of moments. I think very importantly, the elbow didn't seem to be something that was giving him too much trouble. If that's the case, I really am interested to see if Alcaraz can, start to unlock some of his potential on the surface, because at the end of the day, this is still only his fourth match he's going to be going into after this one on grass in his career. But nonetheless, the talent still shows through, and the potential to be very good on grass is definitely there with some of the flashes you see. And it'll be interesting if he can hang around in this tournament long enough, if he can really get his feet underneath him on this surface by the time he gets to a potential quarterfinal matchup with Djokovic. That being said, definitely a couple of tests ahead for him. Oscar Otta could be tricky as well in the third round, and then Andy Murray in the fourth, if Murray can stay healthy, is definitely going to be a tough out. So it will definitely be interesting to see how Alcaraz's tournament unfolds. Griekspoor next isn't a gimme, but I would anticipate it being easier than the Struff match was. And yeah, that basically wraps up my thoughts on the first round at SW19. Crazy stuff. If you stuck around this long, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, it would be much appreciated if you could drop a like, help this video perform better in YouTube's algorithm, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Thank you again so much for watching, and of course, I will see y'all in the next one.